Hey everyone, welcome to Van Nuys Airport where I keep 424 Sierra Mike, my Lancair Evolution. It just came out of conditional inspection, which is basically annual inspection in the experimental world. And because I can't help myself, I got a lot of extras done while it was up there. I did not have access to this airplane for over a month, which basically, you know, pilots out there, in a month you forget how to fly, you forget how to check checklists, and all of these things. But I gotta tell you, it is worth it, because I got a lot of safety items added, I got a lot of nice to haves added, and then of course, every cable, every bearing, every hinge, all the fluids, all replaced and tightened because it was getting loose. So, you know, I had to get back before that presidential TFR came into effect. Co-pilot Patrick picked me up in his Cirrus G5 and we flew to Oregon. It normally would take a little bit over 3 hours, but we had a 80 to 90 knot headwind the whole way up. So it took us 5 hours to get to Oregon, which really only left me about 3 hours to make it back. One great thing about flying in a Cirrus is it flies so low that you have cell service. So I texted my mechanic, I ordered some sandwiches for all of us. The second we landed, fuel trucks fueled this plane and Patrick's plane. I wolfed down a sandwich. I got in my plane, closed the doors, and I took off, racing to get back to Van Nuys before that presidential dome slammed Los Angeles shut. Well, the good news about having a headwind going up is I had an incredible tailwind coming down. Also, I was at flight level 270. I had a 90 knot tailwind. It took me an hour and 45 minutes to go from Redmond, Oregon to Van Nuys. I landed with about a half hour to spare, and I was able to go to all the Christmas parties here in Los Angeles with my friends because of it. Okay, first things first, because it came up in so many comments, how did I get that beautiful 360-degree exterior shot? You see down here, my GoPro 360 is mounted to my airplane. Normally where a tie-down ring goes, but we found a perfect mount. It's super tight and super safe, and it gives some beautiful exterior shots. This airplane is carbon fiber, and so there is no way to mount any other exterior cameras other than this one and be safe. So that will be always be the shot. So as I mentioned, the list of things that needed to be taken care of on 424 Sierra Mike was long and it was very expensive. All the cables and pulleys, trim tabs, the rudder, everything was loose, super loose. So I had my airplane mechanic up in Bend, Oregon. Say hi, Matt.
Hi, guys.
Thanks, Matt, for all your hard work.
Absolutely.
Flight metrics, if you ever have any evolution, that's where you want to get it fixed. In addition to that, we replaced the oil, we replaced the hydraulic fluid. I had my struts rebuilt, all things that add to safety. One of the many important things I had done on this airplane, get my prop heat fixed. This propeller is heated. It has these heating pads on all 4 blades. But what was happening is when I would heat the propeller, the heat would come up, but it would give me errors inside my plane, and I would get red CAS messages, and I'd get oral warnings, and it would sound terrible, and I'd ultimately just have to give up and turn off the prop heat, because it was almost impossible to fly my plane with the MFD and PFD flashing red. So we got that fixed. One of the other things that was important, plane doesn't do such a great job sitting on the ground in heat, and I know a lot of planes don't, but what happens to this plane, and particularly when I'm flying in and out of Las Vegas, which is probably my #1 mission in this plane, is that the cable between the propeller and inside, the prop lever melted because I have sat on the ground in Las Vegas for up to an hour in 100+ degree Fahrenheit temperatures, which caused the exterior sheath to melt around the cable, and so I could no longer easily move my propeller. So note to self, as much as I love to fly into Las Vegas, you know, Reed Airport, I need to not anymore because they don't want to let me off the ground. They make me sit there while all these beautiful 737s and private planes are going off, and I'm sitting there and my airplane's melting. So that's all fixed, and I'm really happy about that. One thing incredibly about this plane is it had no stall warning system at all. No stall horn, no stall warning, nothing. The only way you knew if you were going to stall is if you really started to feel it, and you really had to pay close attention to the speeds that you were flying, which was really important. And I was obviously, so far so good, never crashed, but I really wanted to add an extra margin of safety. And one thing I had when I used to fly my Cirrus Turbo G5 was an AOA indicator. So that angle of attack is everything. As you know, an airplane can stall at any speed, but will always stall at the same angle of attack. And so what we did was we replaced the pitot tube, and this is a Garmin pitot tube which tests differential pressure. And then if you come around here, you'll see I added an angle of attack indicator. And so now at least I have some indication of how I'm flying, what my angle of attack is, and I'm hoping that my landings will be much smoother, because what happened to me as a pilot was I would, for margin of safety, kept flying my approaches a little faster, and I was crossing the threshold a little faster than I wanted to, because I'm flying airspeeds, and how heavy am I? I'm not really sure exactly how much, I know how much fuel I have left, but who's doing that calculation at the last second when you're trying to land? If you fly this center donut right here, you will be landing at the most appropriate speed every single time. One of the most interesting things about this plane is that it does have a Garmin. It's called a G900, so it's not a G1000 or Perspective like you have in Cirrus. It's the experimental aircraft version of that same system. But all my engine instruments, if you can see, are all the way on the right side. So you see my torque and my ITT and all of the really important engine instruments over there. So this plane has a lot of torque. So when you're trying to take off, when you're adding power, you're adding a ton of right rudder. And I kid you not, if you have to crane your neck over about a foot to see the instruments, your plane sort of starts going the way you're leaning. But the way I solved that was I had my mechanics, I had them take my engine instruments and move them to my PFD as well. So now when I'm setting torque on takeoff, it's right in front of me. So I took off from Redmond on Friday. I had to get back to Los Angeles before a presidential TFR came into effect. I hit the power. I was able to set that power just perfectly. I wasn't hunting for it because I wasn't trying to look at too many things simultaneously. And it was really the first time, don't tell anyone, that I took off like right on the center line. So I'm really glad that I added these engine instruments on the left side as well. Okay, so this plane is pressurized, which is absolutely amazing. So I take this at either flight level 270 or flight level 280 whenever possible, because that's when it runs the best, that's when I get the best fuel efficiency, that's when I get the best speeds. But I have backup oxygen in case we have a loss of pressurization. It's right here between my legs. There's 4 seats and 4 backup oxygen. But the problem is that down here is where the oxygen on switch is, and it used to not be guarded. It was just a toggle switch hanging there, and so I had these guards put in to prevent losing that oxygen. On the plane here, there's rubber. Inside here are pumps, is a pump and a pressure switch. And so when you get in the plane, you sort of seal up the plane, it inflates this rubber, and also for the baggage door, and creates an airtight seal so that it can give you really good pressure. And this plane is incredibly tight, and that's what you want when you're flying at flight level 270. So as I was saying about the door, the passenger door, this actually acts as an emergency egress as well, but it's also the baggage compartment. So these seals inflate, and they just weren't inflating well. And what they were doing is they were letting oxygen out. In fact, the middle of this year, I was flying up to Bend, Oregon over the Sierras, and I lost all cabin pressure. And the problem with that was I had my mask on, but I couldn't descend because I was above a very thick icing layer. So I could not descend through this icing layer. Fun fact, this plane, aside from a heated prop and a pitot tube, has no ice protection. So we try to avoid ice at all costs. The entire pressurization system was overhauled, and I'm incredibly happy. It's working really well. And of course, the #1 most important safety item that I had done on the airplane. I had the exhaust stack polished so you can see reflection in it. So these guys can see me coming from 1,000 miles away. This thing is as shiny as they come. So thanks for coming to Flying with Brian. I hope you got to learn a lot more about the absolute best plane in the entire world, my Lancair Evolution with 750 horsepower Pratt & Whitney engine up front. Obviously, it's an expensive hobby, but I love it so much. There's really nothing I would rather do than fly this plane and share it with you. We're gonna be doing some incredible journeys in the next couple of months. I'll tell you a little bit about what it's like to get an experimental aircraft into Mexico, because Mexico does not want experimental aircrafts. The hoops I had to jump through to make that happen. In the meantime, if you like this content, please don't just like, don't just follow, don't just subscribe. Tell your friends. Send this to your friends so that they can follow us too. And hopefully I'll see you out there in the skies somewhere.